Get out of my house! Robert Harrison's voice shook as he pointed at the pregnant woman standing in his doorway. I don't care who sent you. I don't care what lies they told you. Sarah is dead to me, and so is anyone connected to her. Elena Vasquez felt her daughter kick hard against her ribs. She had traveled 4,000 miles, survived 18 months in a refugee camp, and buried a husband she loved more than life itself, all to stand before a grandfather who was supposed to save her, only to have him slam the door in her face. But Elena didn't move, because clutched in her hand was a photograph she'd found in the refugee center's file. A photograph of her mother as a young woman, standing in a basement surrounded by something that made no sense at all. If you want to discover what Elena's mother was hiding and why Robert Harrison just lied to her face, subscribe and follow this story to the very end. Comment your city below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me tell you how Elena Vasquez ended up on that doorstep and what happened in the 60 seconds after that door slammed shut. 3 days earlier, Patricia Chen had made a decision that would change everything. Elena, I need you to sit down. Elena Vasquez lowered herself into the chair across from Patricia's desk, one hand pressed against her swollen belly. 7 months pregnant. Alone. Running out of time in every way that mattered. You found something, Elena said. I can see it in your face. Patricia pulled a folder from her locked drawer, the drawer she used for cases that kept her awake at night. Your grandfather is alive. Elena laughed. The sound came out broken, almost violent. My grandfather died before I was born, both of them. My mother had no family left. That's why Your mother lied. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She gripped the armrests of her chair, knuckles whitening. What did you say? Patricia slid the folder across the desk. Your mother's real name was Sarah Harrison. She grew up on a farm in Vermont. Her father, Robert Harrison, is 78 years old and has been searching for her for 30 years. He found out she died 2 years ago. He found out about you 3 weeks ago. He wants custody. Elena didn't touch the folder. This is insane. It's documented. Birth certificates, family records, property deeds. Your mother changed her identity when she was 19, changed her name, left the country, and never looked back. Why? Elena's voice cracked. Why would she do that? That's what I was hoping you could tell me. Patricia leaned forward. Elena, you have 48 hours before this facility transfers you to group housing. A pregnant woman in a shared room with 12 strangers. No privacy, no stability, no guarantee of anything. And the alternative is a grandfather who's been dead my entire life, a man my mother ran from so desperately she erased herself. The alternative is family, legal sponsorship, a home. Elena's hands moved to her belly. Inside, her daughter kicked in steady rhythm as if marking time that was running out. What aren't you telling me? Patricia hesitated. That hesitation told Elena everything. There's something else in that folder, Elena said. Something you don't want to show me. Patricia's jaw tightened. Then she opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. Elena took it with trembling hands. The image showed a young woman, her mother unmistakably standing in what looked like a basement or cellar. Behind her, rows of strange vessels lined the walls. Ceramic containers, wooden barrels, glass jars filled with substances Elena couldn't identify. Her mother was smiling, but her eyes held something Elena had never seen in any photo of her before. Fear. What is this? Elena whispered. I don't know. It was in Robert Harrison's file attached to his custody application. No explanation, just this photo and a note that said she needs to understand before she decides. Elena stared at her mother's young face. The woman who had raised her, taught her to cook, shared every secret, or so Elena had believed. This woman was a stranger. When can I meet him? Patricia blinked. You want to go? I want answers. Elena's voice hardened. My mother lied to me for 30 years. This man has been looking for her for just as long. Someone is going to tell me the truth and I'm going to find out what's in that basement. Elena, you're 7 months pregnant. If something goes wrong... Something already went wrong. My husband is dead. My country tried to kill me. I've spent 18 months proving to strangers that my trauma is real enough to deserve help. Elena stood the photograph still clutched in her hand. 48 hours, you said. Tell Robert Harrison I'll be ready tomorrow morning. She was at the door when Patricia spoke again. Elena, one more thing. Elena turned. I called the local sheriff's department in Vermont. Just a routine check. Patricia's voice was careful. They said Robert Harrison is a good man, keeps to himself, helps his neighbors, but they also said something strange. What? They said no one has been inside that farmhouse in 30 years. Not repairmen, not delivery drivers, not neighbors. Whatever he's doing in there, he's doing it alone. Elena felt cold spread through her chest. Then I'll be the first. She left before Patricia could respond. That night, Elena didn't sleep. She sat on her narrow bed in the dormitory, surrounded by the sounds of other women crying, praying, murmuring in languages from around the world, and studied the photograph of her mother. The basement in the image was large, professionally organized. The vessels on the shelves had labels, but Elena couldn't read them in the grainy photo. Her mother's posture was strange. Proud and terrified, at the same time as if she was showing off something she also wanted to escape. Elena pulled out her phone and searched Robert Harrison, Vermont engineer. The results were sparse. An aerospace engineer who had worked for defense contractors. Retired 15 years ago. Widowed almost 30 years ago. She searched Harrison Farm, Vermont. Nothing about a basement. Nothing about ceramics or fermentation or whatever those vessels contained. She searched Sarah Harrison, Vermont, missing. Nothing. Her mother had erased herself so completely that the internet held no trace of her original identity. But someone had kept this photo. Someone had preserved this image of a young woman standing in a basement full of secrets. Elena whispered to her daughter in Spanish. What did your grandmother run from, mija? What scared her so much she became someone else? The baby kicked, offering no answers. At 6 in the morning, Elena packed everything she owned into 2 suitcases and 1 backpack. It took less than 20 minutes. 18 months of displacement had taught her to travel light. At 8, Patricia arrived at the dormitory door. He's early, Patricia said. He's been sitting in the parking lot since 5:30. Elena felt something twist in her stomach. Watching the building. Waiting for you. He asked if he could come inside. I said no. Good. They walked together to the facility entrance. Through the glass doors, Elena could see an old Navy truck parked near the curb. A figure sat motionless in the driver's seat. Patricia grabbed Elena's arm. Last chance. I can still arrange group housing. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Elena adjusted her grip on her bags. Call me every day. If I don't answer, I'll send the police, I promise. Elena pushed through the doors and walked toward the truck. Robert Harrison stepped out, slowly leaning on a cane. He was tall despite his age, with thick white hair and deep brown eyes that matched Elena's exactly. When he saw her, his carefully controlled expression cracked, and something raw flickered underneath. Elena! His voice broke on her name. You look just like her, just like Sarah. You mean Sophia? Elena kept her voice flat. That's the name she used for 30 years. The name she chose after she escaped from you. Robert flinched as if struck. I suppose I deserve that. You deserve worse. Elena stepped closer, using her height. I've seen the photograph, the one you included in your file, my mother standing in your basement looking terrified. Robert went very still. You weren't supposed to see that yet. Too late. Now tell me what you're hiding, or I get back on a bus to anywhere but here. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Your mother wrote this the night before she left. I found it hidden in her room years later. I've read it so many times I have it memorized. He held it out to Elena. But you should read it yourself. Elena took the envelope. It was old, yellowed with age, her mother's handwriting visible on the front for whoever finds this after I'm gone. Open it. Elena hesitated. Then she broke the seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper, her mother's handwriting. Younger, less steady than Elena remembered, but unmistakably hers. Read it out loud, Robert said. I need to hear it in your voice. Elena's hands shook as she began to read. To whoever finds this, I'm leaving tonight and I'm never coming back. My father isn't a monster, but he's created something monstrous, something that's been growing in our basement for longer than I've been alive. He calls it his legacy. He calls it his gift to the future. But I've seen what it does to people. I've seen how it consumed my mother before she died. I've seen how it's consuming him now. I won't let it consume me. I'm taking the only thing that matters, the recipe that started it all, and I'm destroying it. He'll never complete his work without it. The world will be safer. I'm sorry for whoever reads this. I'm sorry I couldn't stop him. I'm sorry I could only run. But sometimes running is the bravest thing you can do. Sarah. Elena lowered the letter. Her hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. My mother thought you were creating something dangerous. Your mother was wrong. Robert's voice was quiet but fierce. What I'm creating isn't dangerous. It's the opposite. It's preservation. It's patience. It's everything our fast, destructive world has forgotten how to value. Then why did she run? Because she didn't understand. Because I failed to explain. Because I was so consumed by grief after Elizabeth died that I pushed Sarah away instead of pulling her close. Robert's eyes glistened. I've had 30 years to think about my mistakes. 30 years to understand how I failed her. I can't get her back. But I can show you what she never let me show her. I can give you the truth she refused to hear. Elena stared at the letter in her hands. Her mother's words, written 30 years ago, warning about something monstrous in a basement. "Get in the truck," Robert said. "Let me show you. If you hate what you see, I'll drive you back here myself, but I need you to see it first." Elena looked at him, this stranger, with her eyes this ghost from her mother's hidden past. "The photograph," she said. "The one in the file. When was it taken?" "The night before Sarah left. She asked me to take it. She wanted proof of what she'd seen in case anyone ever questioned her story. But no one ever did, because she disappeared so completely no one knew she existed. Until now." Robert's voice dropped. "Until you." Elena made her decision. She walked to the passenger side of the truck, opened the door, and climbed in. Robert loaded her bags and got behind the wheel. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Elena watched the refugee center disappear in the side mirror. 18 months of institutional life fading into the distance. Whatever waited for her in Vermont, it couldn't be worse than the limbo she was leaving behind. The drive took 6 hours. For the first 2, neither of them spoke. Elena watched the landscape change, highways giving way to country roads, cities shrinking to towns, civilization fading into forests and fields. Finally, she broke the silence. "Tell me about my grandmother, Elizabeth." Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "She was a chef, trained in France before we married, the most talented cook I've ever known." "My mother was a chef, too. She trained me." "I know, the skill passes down. Elizabeth always said cooking was in the blood." Robert paused. "She was sick for years before she died. A degenerative condition that slowly took away her ability to taste, to cook, to do the things she loved most. Near the end, she couldn't even eat solid food." Elena felt something twist in her chest. "That's terrible." It was, but Elizabeth didn't give up. She decided that if she couldn't cook anymore, she would create something that would last after she was gone. Something that would continue developing, improving, growing, even without her. "The basement." "The basement." Robert nodded slowly. "We started it together years before she got sick, but after her diagnosis it became an obsession. She wanted to leave behind flavors that would mature over decades. Techniques that would outlast both of us, a legacy that didn't require her physical presence to continue." Elena thought about her mother's cooking. The complex flavors that seemed to come from nowhere. The dishes that took days or weeks to prepare properly. Had Sophia learned those techniques here in this basement she later fled from? "What happened between you and Sarah?" Elena asked. "The real story, not the version you tell strangers." Robert was quiet for a long time. The truck hummed along the highway, passing signs for towns Elena had never heard of. "Elizabeth died when Sarah was 17. For a while, we grieved together. But then I dove back into the work, the basement, the fermentation projects, the things Elizabeth and I had started. I told myself I was honoring her memory. Sarah thought I was hiding from my grief." "Were you?" "Maybe? Probably. Yes." Robert's jaw tightened. "Sarah wanted me to sell the farm, move somewhere new, start fresh. She thought the basement was consuming me the way she believed it had consumed her mother. She begged me to stop." "But you didn't." "I couldn't. The work was all I had left of Elizabeth. Every project in that basement she'd started with me. Every ferment, every culture, every experiment it contained. Pieces of her? Destroying it would have been like killing her all over again." Elena thought about the letter in her pocket. "My father isn't a monster, but he's created something monstrous." "Sarah said the basement was dangerous. She said it consumed people." "She was wrong." Robert's voice hardened. "The basement isn't dangerous. It's patience made physical. It's the understanding that some things can't be rushed, that the best flavors require years or decades to develop. Your mother saw her mother's obsession and assumed the work itself was poison. She never understood that Elizabeth's dedication was love, not madness." "That's convenient, blaming the dead woman who can't defend herself." "I'm not blaming Elizabeth. I'm trying to explain her. There's a difference." Robert glanced at Elena. "You're a chef. You understand that great cooking requires sacrifice. It demands time, attention, patience. Elizabeth gave everything to her work, and yes, that meant sometimes Sarah felt neglected. But the work wasn't the villain Sarah made it out to be." Elena processed this, weighing his words against her mother's letter. Two versions of the same story. Two people who had both loved Sarah and both lost her. "The recipe," Elena said suddenly. "The one my mother said she stole. The one she said she destroyed." Robert's expression flickered pain-hope. Something else she couldn't identify. The recipe wasn't destroyed. It was hidden. Elena's heart stopped. "What?" "I found evidence last year, papers in your mother's old room, that she'd missed when she packed. Notes suggesting she'd hidden the recipe somewhere, intending to destroy it later, but never getting the chance." Robert's voice dropped. "I believe she took it with her when she left the country. I believe it's still out there somewhere waiting to be found." "Why does it matter so much? It's just a recipe." "It's not just a recipe." Robert turned to look at her directly. "It's the key to everything Elizabeth and I built. Without it, the work in the basement can never be completed. With it, we could create something that's never existed before. A fermented compound that takes 25 years to mature fully. The project is already 23 years along. But without that recipe, the final transformation can never happen." Elena felt dizzy. "You're telling me my mother stole a recipe that would complete a 25-year science experiment?" "I'm telling you that your mother tried to stop something she didn't understand, and now maybe you can understand it for her." They drove in silence for the next hour. Elena's mind raced, trying to piece together this puzzle of family secrets and hidden recipes in basement laboratories. Her mother had been many things: a chef, a storyteller, a loving parent, but Elena had never thought of her as a thief. Never imagined she'd been running from something so specific, so calculated. But the letter was real. The photograph was real. And the man sitting beside her had spent 30 years waiting for someone to understand. "We're almost there," Robert said as they turned onto a gravel road. Elena's phone buzzed. "A text from Patricia. Everything okay?" she typed back. "Just arrived. We'll call tonight." Patricia's response was immediate. "Be careful. Something feels wrong about this whole situation." Elena stared at the message. Before she could respond, another text came through, this one from an unknown number. "Your mother called me the night before she died. She said if anything happened to her, I should find you and tell you the truth about the basement. My name is Margaret Chen. I was your mother's best friend for 30 years. She never told you about me because she was protecting you. She was protecting you from him." Elena's blood went cold. She looked at Robert, who was focused on the road ahead, seemingly unaware of what had just appeared on her screen. "Who is Margaret Chen?" she wanted to ask. "Why was my mother protecting me from you?" But she kept silent. Because if Robert was dangerous, if her mother's letter was right, Elena needed to gather information before she revealed what she knew. The truck crested a small hill, and the farm appeared before them. A white farmhouse with a wraparound porch. A massive red barn. A greenhouse that gleamed in the afternoon light. And somewhere underneath it all, a basement that had driven her mother to run. "Welcome to Harrison Farm," Robert said quietly. "Welcome home?" Elena pressed her hand against her belly and felt her daughter kick. "Home?" The word felt like a threat. Robert helped her with her bags, moving slowly but insisting on carrying the heaviest suitcase. Elena followed him into the farmhouse, her eyes scanning everything: exits, windows, locks, anything that might matter if she needed to leave quickly. The interior was clean and old-fashioned, hardwood floors, large windows, a kitchen that made Elena stop dead in her tracks. Professional-grade equipment, 6-burner stove, double oven, a walk-in pantry visible through a partially open door. "Your grandmother designed this kitchen," Robert said. "Elizabeth spent more time here than anywhere else in the house." Elena walked through the space, slowly touching the equipment. The stove was expensive restaurant quality. The ovens were industrial. Whoever had built this kitchen had been serious about cooking. But it was the smell that caught her attention. Something drifting from somewhere below. Rich, complex, ancient. Fermentation. The same smell from the photograph. "Your room is this way," Robert said, leading her down a hallway. "Ground floor private bathroom lock on the door. I had it prepared last week." Elena examined the room carefully. The lock worked. The windows opened easily. The bathroom was modern and functional. "I'm tired," she said, though she wasn't. "I'd like to rest before we talk more." Robert nodded, something flickering in his eyes. Disappointment maybe, or understanding. "Dinner is at 6. I'll knock." He left, closing the door behind him. Elena waited until his footsteps faded. Then she pulled out her phone and called the unknown number that had texted her. It rang twice before a woman answered. "Elena." The voice was rough-aged but warm. "Thank God you called?" Who are you? Who are you? How did you know my mother? My name is Margaret Chen. Your mother and I met in a cooking class 30 years ago, right after she arrived in the country. She told me everything about her past, about the farm, about what her father was building in that basement. She made me promise that if anything ever happened to her, I would find you and warn you. Warn me about what? There was a long pause. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was lower, more urgent. The fermentation projects aren't food, Elena. They're something else entirely. Your grandmother Elizabeth was a scientist before she was a chef. She and Robert were working on something that goes beyond cooking something that affects the human body in ways that aren't natural. Elena gripped the phone tighter. What do you mean? Your grandmother believed she could create compounds that would extend human life, slow aging, prevent disease. She experimented on herself for years, and Robert continued after she died. The basement isn't a kitchen, Elena. It's a laboratory, and the recipe your mother stole was the key to everything. That's impossible. My grandfather was an aerospace engineer, not a biologist. He was both. They both were. The aerospace career was a cover, a source of funding and equipment for their real work. Margaret's voice cracked. Your mother watched her own mother die from those experiments. Elizabeth's degenerative condition wasn't natural. It was a side effect. The fermentation compounds were killing her slowly, and she refused to stop taking them because she believed she was on the verge of a breakthrough. Elena felt sick. Why are you telling me this now? Why didn't you contact me sooner? Because Robert has people watching, people who protect the work, who believe in what he's doing. I couldn't risk reaching out while you were in the refugee system, too many records, too much surveillance, but now that you're at the farm, you need to know the truth before it's too late. Too late for what? Margaret's response was a whisper. Before he starts adding the compounds to your food. That's how it begins? That's how Elizabeth started, and that's how your mother almost died before she escaped. The call ended. Elena stared at her phone, heart pounding. She thought about the professional kitchen, the strange smell drifting from below, the letter her mother had written 30 years ago. My father isn't a monster, but he's created something monstrous. Outside her window, the sun was setting behind the Vermont hills. Somewhere in this house, her grandfather was preparing dinner. Dinner that Elena suddenly had no intention of eating. She looked at the lock on her door, then at the windows, then at the photograph still clutched in her hand. Her mother had run from this place, had changed her identity and crossed an ocean to escape. Elena had run toward it, had walked willingly into a trap that her mother had spent 30 years warning her about. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, and Elena made a decision. She wasn't going to run. Not yet. Not until she understood everything. But she also wasn't going to eat anything Robert Harrison prepared, and tomorrow, no matter what he said, she was going down to that basement. She needed to see for herself what her grandmother had created. She needed to understand what her mother had died protecting her from. She needed the truth, even if the truth destroyed everything she thought she knew. Elena pressed her hand against her belly and whispered to her daughter, We're not victims, mija. We're not running anymore. We're going to find out what's really in that basement, and then we're going to decide what to do about it. The baby kicked in response. Outside, the last light faded from the sky, and somewhere below Elena's feet in a basement she hadn't yet seen, decades of secrets waited to be discovered. The knock came at exactly 6 o'clock. Elena stood frozen in the center of her room phone, still warm in her hand, for Margaret Chen's call. 3 hours had passed since she'd locked herself inside, 3 hours of staring at the photograph of her mother, 3 hours of wondering if she'd walked into a trap she couldn't escape. Elena? Robert's voice through the door was gentle. Dinner's ready. She forced her voice to stay calm. I'm not hungry. The drive made me nauseous. A pause. Then, you need to eat. For the baby. Elena's hand moved instinctively to her belly. The baby had been still for the past hour, as if sensing her mother's fear. I have crackers in my bag. I'll eat something later. Another pause, longer this time. When Robert spoke again, something had shifted in his tone. Elena, I know you're scared. I know this situation is strange. But starving yourself won't make it less strange. It will only make you weaker. Weaker. The word choice sent ice through her veins. I said I'm fine. At least let me bring you some bread. Plain bread, nothing else. You can watch me slice it from the loaf. Elena's mind raced. If Margaret was telling the truth, if Robert had been adding compounds to food, would plain bread be safe? Could she trust anything that came from this house? Leave it outside the door, she said finally. I'll get it when I'm ready. She heard him set something down. His footsteps retreated down the hallway. Elena waited 10 full minutes before opening the door. A plate sat on the floor, 2 slices of bread plain exactly as he'd promised. Beside it, a glass of water. She picked up the bread and sniffed it. It smelled normal. Looked normal. But her mother's letter burned in her pocket. My father isn't a monster, but he's created something monstrous. Elena set the bread on her dresser and didn't touch it. At 9 o'clock, she heard Robert's bedroom door close upstairs. She waited another hour listening to the old house settle before she crept out of her room. The hallway was dark. Elena moved slowly, one hand on the wall, the other pressed against her belly as if protecting her daughter from whatever she was about to discover. The kitchen was empty. Moonlight filtered through the windows, illuminating the professional equipment, the massive stove. The walk-in pantry where that strange smell seemed to originate. Elena approached the pantry door. It was slightly ajar, just as she'd seen it earlier. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The pantry was larger than she'd expected, lined with shelves of ingredients, flour, sugar, spices, oils, normal things. But at the back she noticed something she'd missed before. Another door, heavier than the pantry door, with a modern electronic lock that looked completely out of place in this old farmhouse. The basement. Elena's heart pounded so loudly she was certain Robert could hear it upstairs. She approached the door and examined the lock, a keypad requiring a code plus what looked like a fingerprint scanner. She wasn't getting through this door tonight, but as she turned to leave, her foot caught on something. She looked down and saw a crack in the floorboards, wider than the others, running along the base of the wall. Elena knelt, ignoring the protest from her pregnant body, and peered into the crack. Air. Cool, fragrant air was flowing up from below. That smell fermentation, but also something else, something chemical and sharp, was stronger here. She pressed her ear to the floor and heard voices. Elena's blood froze. Robert was supposed to be upstairs in his bedroom, but she could hear him speaking, his voice muffled but unmistakable, coming from somewhere beneath her feet. And he wasn't alone. "The timeline is accelerating," Robert said. "She's more suspicious than I expected." A second voice responded, female, older, unfamiliar. "Did you show her the letter?" "Yes, she read it in the parking lot. It affected her exactly as you predicted." "And the phone call?" "Did she receive Margaret's message?" Elena stopped breathing. "I assume so. She refused dinner, locked herself in her room for hours." "Good. Everything is proceeding according to plan." Elena's mind reeled. They knew about Margaret. They knew about the phone call. This wasn't a warning from her mother's friend. It was a setup. But for what? "When do we proceed to the next phase?" Robert asked. "Tomorrow. Show her the basement. Give her exactly what she thinks she wants. The truth, or at least the version of truth that serves our purposes. And if she runs," the woman laughed. "She won't run. She's too curious, too much like her mother." A pause. "Besides, where would she go? She's 7 months pregnant alone in a country that barely tolerates her presence. We're her only option. She knows it. She just hasn't accepted it yet." Elena heard footsteps approaching the door from the basement side. She scrambled backward, moving as quietly as her pregnant body allowed. Slipping out of the pantry and into the dark kitchen, she made it back to her room just as she heard the basement door open behind her. Elena locked her door and pressed her back against it, heart slamming against her ribs. Her daughter kicked violently as if sharing her mother's terror. They were watching her. They had been watching her from the beginning. The phone call from Margaret wasn't a warning. It was a test, and Elena had just failed it. She didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, trying to decide what to do. Calling Patricia was the obvious choice. But if Robert was monitoring her calls, if they knew about the Margaret conversation before she'd even finished it, then reaching out for help might make things worse. She could try to leave. The car keys were supposedly in the barn. But she was 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and had no idea where she was or how to get back to civilization. Or she could play along. Pretend she didn't know she was being manipulated. Go down to the basement tomorrow, see what Robert wanted to show her, and gather information until she found a way out. Elena looked at the photograph of her mother. The young woman in the image had faced the same choice 30 years ago. She had chosen to run. Elena was going to choose differently. At 6 in the morning, she heard Robert moving in the kitchen. Elena washed her face, changed her clothes, and walked out of her room with her head held high. Robert looked up from the stove, surprise flickering across his face. "You're awake early?" "I couldn't sleep." Elena sat at the kitchen table watching him cook. "The baby kept me up." "Is everything all right? Do you need to see a doctor?" "I'm fine, just adjusting to a new place." She kept her voice casual. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about the basement." Robert's hand stilled over the pan. "Yes, I want to see it. Today. This morning if possible." He turned to look at her, studying her face with those eyes that matched her own. Are you sure after yesterday? I thought you might need more time. I've had 30 years of not knowing the truth about my mother. I don't want to wait any longer. Robert was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. After breakfast. I'll show you everything. I'm not hungry. You need to eat, Elena. Whatever you're afraid of starving yourself won't help. Elena met his gaze directly. I'll eat when I understand what's happening here. Something shifted in Robert's expression. Respect, maybe, or calculation. Fair enough, he said. Let me finish my coffee and we'll go down. They walked to the pantry together. Robert approached the electronic lock and entered a code Elena watched carefully, memorizing the sequence, then pressed his thumb to the scanner. The door clicked open. After you, Robert said. Elena descended the stairs into darkness. Cool air washed over her, carrying that complex smell. Fermentation, yes, but also something else now. Something medicinal. Lights flickered on automatically as she reached the bottom. Elena stopped breathing. The basement was enormous, at least twice the size of the farmhouse above. The walls were lined with shelves holding hundreds of vessels, ceramic crocks, glass jars, wooden barrels, metal containers with digital displays showing temperature and humidity readings. But that wasn't what made her freeze. In the center of the room stood a hospital bed. Medical equipment surrounded it, monitors, IV stands, machines she didn't recognize. And on the walls, charts and diagrams covered with chemical formulas and biological terminology. What is this? Elena whispered. Robert descended the stairs behind her. This is my life's work. Your grandmother's life's work. What we've been building for almost 50 years. It looks like a hospital, or a laboratory. It's both. Robert moved past her, touching one of the ceramic vessels gently, almost lovingly. Elena, what do you know about fermentation? I'm a chef. I know it's the process of breaking down sugars using bacteria and yeast. That's the simple definition. But fermentation is so much more than that. It's transformation. It's taking one substance and through time and patience, turning it into something completely different. Something better. He gestured around the room. Your grandmother Elizabeth was a biochemist before she became a chef. She understood that the same processes that create wine from grapes or cheese from milk could potentially create other transformations in the human body itself. Elena felt sick. You're talking about experimenting on people. I'm talking about extending life, preventing disease, slowing the aging process. Robert's voice intensified. Elizabeth was dying, Elena. She had a degenerative condition that was slowly destroying her nervous system. No treatment existed, so she created one. Margaret Chen told me your experiments killed her. Robert's expression hardened. Margaret Chen is a liar who never understood what we were trying to accomplish. Elizabeth's condition was terminal. The compounds we developed gave her an extra 5 years. 5 years she wouldn't have had otherwise. 5 years to complete her research, to pass on her knowledge, to say goodbye to her daughter. Her daughter who eventually ran away because she was terrified of you. Her daughter who was too young and too stubborn to understand. Robert stepped closer, his voice dropping. Sarah saw her mother sick and assumed the compounds were the cause. She refused to listen to explanations, refused to look at the data, refused to consider that what we were doing might actually help people. So you let her go, you let her change her identity and disappear for 30 years. I didn't let her do anything. She made her choice and I was too proud to chase after her. Robert's voice cracked. I've regretted it every day since. But that doesn't change the fact that she was wrong. This work isn't dangerous. It's the most important thing humanity could pursue. Elena looked around the basement, the hospital bed, the medical equipment, the hundreds of fermentation vessels containing God knew what. If this work is so important, why is it hidden in a basement in rural Vermont? Why aren't you in a real laboratory with real funding, with real oversight? Because the world isn't ready. Robert's jaw tightened. Do you have any idea what would happen if pharmaceutical companies learned we'd developed compounds that could extend human life? They would either steal the research or bury it. The medical establishment doesn't want cures, Elena. They want treatments. Ongoing expensive treatments that keep patients dependent forever. That sounds like a conspiracy theory. It sounds like the truth. Robert moved to a computer terminal and pulled up a screen of data. Look at this. 50 years of research. Clinical trials we conducted ourselves. Results that would revolutionize medicine if they were ever published. Elena approached the screen reluctantly. The data was dense, technical, beyond her expertise, but she recognized enough to understand what she was looking at. Human subjects. Dozens of them. With names, dates, and outcomes. You've been testing on people, she said. Volunteers. people who were dying anyway who wanted a chance to try something new. Everything was consensual. Everything was documented. This is illegal. This is necessary. Robert turned to face her fully. Elena, I'm 78 years old. I've been taking these compounds myself for over 20 years. My doctor says I have the cardiovascular system of a man in his 50s. My cognitive function hasn't declined at all. This works. It actually works. Then why do you need me? The question hung in the air between them. Robert was silent for a long moment. Then he walked to a shelf and pulled down a small ceramic vessel. This is the compound your grandmother developed before she died. We called it the foundation, the base from which all other compounds derive. It's been fermenting for 23 years. In 2 more years, it will reach full maturity. When it does, it will be the most powerful life-extending substance ever created. He held up the vessel carefully. But there's a problem. The foundation requires a specific catalyst to complete its transformation, a recipe your grandmother developed in her final months. The only copy of that recipe was in a notebook Sarah took when she left. Elena felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. You didn't bring me here out of family love. You brought me here because you think I have the recipe. I brought you here because you're my granddaughter and I want to know you. Robert's voice softened. But yes, I also hoped you might have the recipe or know where your mother hid it. Without it, everything Elizabeth and I worked for will be incomplete. I don't have any recipe. I've never seen any notebook. My mother never mentioned anything like this. Are you sure? Think carefully. Old papers, family documents, anything she might have saved from her life before. Elena thought about her mother's possessions. The restaurant had burned in the violence that killed Miguel. Most of Sophia's personal belongings were destroyed, but there had been one box that Elena had saved a small collection of papers and photographs that she'd carried through the refugee camp that was currently sitting in her suitcase upstairs. She hadn't looked through it in years. I don't know, Elena said carefully. I'd have to check. Robert's eyes brightened with hope and something else. Hunger. Would you look through your mother's things and see if there's anything that might help? Elena realized she had leverage now, something Robert wanted, something she could use. I'll look, she said, but first I want you to answer some questions, honestly. Anything. The woman I heard you talking to last night, who is she? Robert's expression froze. For the first time since she'd arrived, he looked genuinely caught off guard. You heard that conversation. The floor has cracks. Sound travels. Elena kept her voice steady. You told her everything was proceeding according to plan, that you knew about the phone call from Margaret, that you were manipulating me. Robert closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his expression had changed harder, more calculating. Dr. Helen Wright, my partner in this work for the past 15 years. She's been monitoring the situation, helping me anticipate your reactions, preparing for various scenarios. Scenarios where I refuse to cooperate. Scenarios where you need convincing. Elena's hands moved to her belly protectively. What happens if I can't be convinced? What happens if I decide to leave? I would prefer that you stay willingly, that you understand and accept what we're doing here. Robert paused. But you're carrying my great-grandchild. That child has Harrison blood, and this work, this legacy belongs to the Harrison family. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. Robert's voice was calm, almost gentle. You have nowhere to go, Elena. No money, no connections, no legal status beyond temporary refugee sponsorship. I'm your sponsor. If I withdraw support, you're back in the system or worse, deported to a country where you'll face the same violence that killed your husband. Elena felt cold spread through her chest. You would do that. You would throw your own granddaughter out to die. I would do whatever is necessary to protect this work. Elizabeth gave her life for it. I've given 50 years of mine. I won't let it fail because one stubborn young woman can't see past her mother's prejudices. The mask was off now. Elena saw her grandfather clearly, for the first time, not a grieving old man seeking reconciliation, but a true believer willing to sacrifice anything for his cause. I understand, Elena said quietly. Do you really? I understand that you're alone, that you've been alone for 30 years with no one to share this work, no one to continue it after you're gone. You're 78 years old, Robert. Even with your compounds, you don't have much time left. You need an heir, someone to carry on Elizabeth's legacy. Robert's expression flickered. She'd struck a nerve. You're not wrong, he admitted. So let's make a deal. Elena stepped closer, ignoring every instinct screaming at her to run. "I'll look for the recipe. I'll help you complete the foundation if I can, but in return, you give me something." "What?" "The truth, all of it. No more manipulation, no more tests, no more conversations with Dr. Wright about how to handle me. You want an heir? Then treat me like family, not like a subject in one of your experiments." Robert studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. "You are like Sarah, like Elizabeth, all that fire, that determination." He extended his hand. "Deal." Elena shook it, knowing she was making a bargain with someone who had already proven he couldn't be trusted. But she needed time. Time to search for an escape route. Time to find out if her mother's box contained anything useful. Time to figure out who Dr. Helen Wright really was and what they were truly planning. The baby kicked and Elena made a silent promise. "Whatever it takes, Mija, we're going to survive this." Elena spent the rest of the morning in her room going through her mother's box. The contents were painfully familiar. Photographs of Sofia and Miguel at their wedding. Documents from Elena's culinary training. A few letters in Spanish, mostly from distant relatives who had passed away years ago. At the bottom of the box, she found something she'd forgotten was there. A small leather notebook, no bigger than her palm. The cover was worn, the pages yellowed with age. Her mother had kept it in her nightstand for as long as Elena could remember, but she'd never looked inside. Elena opened it carefully. The first page contained a single line of text written in English for my daughter. "When you're ready to understand." Elena turned the page and began to read. The notebook was a confession. 30 years of secrets, written in her mother's hand. Sarah Harrison had not merely run from her father. She had documented everything. The experiments, the human trials, the deaths that Robert had never mentioned. Volunteers who had gotten worse instead of better. Subjects who had developed cancers, organ failures, psychological breakdowns. And Elizabeth, the grandmother, Elena had never known, had not died peacefully from a degenerative condition. She had died from compound toxicity. The very substances she'd created to extend her life had poisoned her from the inside out. Robert knew. He had known all along, and he had covered it up. Falsified records buried the evidence so deep that no one would ever find it. Elena kept reading, her horror growing with each page. The recipe Robert wanted so desperately wasn't just a catalyst. It was a corrective, a formula Elizabeth had developed in her final weeks to counteract the toxic effects of the compounds she'd been taking. She had created both the poison and the antidote. Sarah had stolen the recipe to protect people, to prevent Robert from continuing experiments that he refused to acknowledge were killing his subjects. She had hidden the notebook and the formula, planning to destroy them once she was safely away, but she'd never gotten the chance. Life had intervened. Marriage. Marriage, a pregnancy, a new identity that consumed all her energy. The notebook had stayed hidden, passed down to Elena without explanation. Now Elena understood why. The final pages contained instructions, step-by-step directions for creating the corrective formula, along with a warning. If Robert completes the foundation without this corrective, the compound will be toxic to anyone who takes it. He believes he's creating life extension. He's actually creating slow poison. He's been poisoning himself for years without knowing it. That's why his wife died. That's why I had to run. And if you're reading this, my darling daughter, that's why you need to run too. Elena closed the notebook, her hands shaking. Her grandfather wasn't just a true believer. He was a killer. Accidentally, perhaps, but a killer nonetheless, and he had no idea. The foundation he was so desperate to complete would not extend life. It would end it. Everyone who took it would die slowly the same way Elizabeth had died. Elena had two choices. She could give Robert the corrective formula, fix the toxic compounds, and potentially create something that actually worked. Or she could let him complete the foundation without it, watch his life's work fail, and escape while he dealt with the consequences. But there was a third option, one her mother had never considered. Elena could tell Robert the truth. Show him the notebook. Force him to confront what his experiments had actually done. It was a risk. He might not believe her. He might react with violence. He might be so deep in his delusion that no evidence could reach him. But Robert Harrison was Elena's grandfather, the only family she had left, and somewhere buried under 50 years of obsession and denial, there might be a man worth saving. Elena picked up the notebook and walked out of her room. She found Robert in the kitchen, staring out the window at the darkening sky. "I found something," Elena said. Robert turned, hope and anxiety warring in his expression. "The recipe, more than that." Elena held up the notebook. "I found my mother's confession. Everything she learned, everything she saw, everything she was trying to protect me from." Robert's face went pale. "What does it say?" It says the Foundation is toxic. It says your wife died from compound poisoning. It says every volunteer you've tested has either died or will die from the same effects. Elena's voice cracked. It says you've been slowly killing yourself for 20 years. Robert staggered backward, catching himself on the kitchen counter. That's impossible. The data shows... The data is wrong. Elizabeth falsified it to protect you. She knew the truth in her final weeks and she was too sick to fix it. That's why she created the corrective formula. That's what's in this notebook. Elena stepped closer. My mother didn't steal the recipe because she hated you. She stole it because she loved you. Because without this formula, everything you've built is poison. Robert's hands were shaking. His face had gone gray. For a moment, Elena thought he might collapse. Show me, he whispered. Elena handed him the notebook. Robert read in silence, his expression transforming from disbelief to horror to devastation. When he reached the final pages, the corrective formula, the instructions his wife had left, a sound escaped him that Elena would never forget. The sound of a man whose entire life had just been revealed as a lie. Elizabeth knew, Robert said, his voice breaking. She knew, and she never told me. She let me continue the work, take the compounds, believe I was saving us when all along... She was trying to fix it, but she ran out of time. Robert looked up at Elena, tears streaming down his weathered face. I killed her, not the disease me, my work, my obsession. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have questioned the data, done independent verification, something. Robert's hands clenched around the notebook. 50 years, Elena. 50 years of believing I was doing something important, and all I was doing was poisoning everyone I loved. The basement door opened. Footsteps descended the stairs. A woman appeared, older, elegant, with sharp eyes that assessed the situation in seconds. Robert, what's going on? I heard shouting. Dr. Helen Wright, the voice from last night's conversation. Robert turned to face her, and something in his expression made her stop cold. Did you know? Robert asked quietly. Know what? The compounds, the toxicity, Elizabeth's confession. Robert held up the notebook. Did you know what we were actually creating? Helen's expression flickered. Just for a moment, her mask slipped. That moment was enough. You knew, Robert said, realization dawning. You've known for years, and you never told me. Robert, you need to calm down. How long? Robert's voice rose. How long have you known that everything we worked for was killing people? Helen's composure cracked. The work is too important to abandon. The compounds have side effects, yes, but with proper dosing, with adjustments. Side effects? Robert's voice cracked with fury. Elizabeth died. Our volunteers died. I've been slowly dying for 20 years. That's not a side effect. That's murder. Elena watched the confrontation unfold, one hand pressed against her belly. Her daughter was kicking frantically now, responding to the escalating tension. You used me, Robert continued, advancing on Helen. You found out the truth, and instead of telling me, you let me continue the work because you wanted the results. You wanted the life extension for yourself. I wanted what everyone wants, more time. Helen's voice turned cold. Yes, I knew about the toxicity. I also knew Elizabeth had created a corrective that your precious daughter stole 30 years ago. If you'd been able to complete the Foundation properly, none of this would have been a problem. You knew about the corrective formula. I knew it existed. I didn't know where it was. Helen's eyes moved to Elena. Until now. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Elena has the formula, Helen said slowly. She's had it this whole time, which means we can still complete the work. We can fix the toxicity, create a safe compound, achieve everything Elizabeth dreamed of. You're insane, Elena said. I'm practical. Helen stepped closer. You have no idea what that formula is worth. Governments would pay billions for reliable life extension. Pharmaceutical companies would kill for it, and you're carrying it around in a dead woman's notebook like it's a family memento. This conversation is over. Robert moved to stand between Helen and Elena. Get out of my house. Robert, think about what you're doing. I said get out. Robert's voice dropped to something Elena had never heard before. Something dangerous. You've been lying to me for 15 years. You've been watching my granddaughter, manipulating her, treating her like a resource to be exploited. I want you gone. Now. Helen's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Without me, without funding, without connections, you'll have nothing. The work will die with you. Maybe that's what it deserves. Helen stared at Robert for a long moment. Then she laughed a cold, brittle sound. You'll regret this, both of you. She looked at Elena. And you enjoy your victory while it lasts. There are other people who want that formula. People who won't be as patient as I was. She climbed the stairs and disappeared. The farmhouse was silent. Robert turned to face Elena, looking decades older than he had that morning. I'm sorry, he said quietly, for everything, for bringing you here under false pretenses, for the threats, for not seeing the truth until it was forced on me. Elena didn't know how to respond. This man had tried to manipulate her, had threatened her with deportation, had been complicit in experiments that killed people, but he had also just stood between her and Helen Wright. He had chosen his granddaughter over his life's work. What happens now? Elena asked. Robert looked around the kitchen, the professional equipment, the walk-in pantry, the door to the basement that held 50 years of toxic research. Now we figure out what to do with all of this, together if you're willing. He paused. And if you're not willing, if you want to leave right now, I'll drive you anywhere you want to go. No conditions, no threats. I owe you at least that much. Elena thought about her options. She thought about the refugee center, the uncertain future, the baby growing inside her. She thought about her mother, who had run from this place and never looked back. And she thought about her grandmother Elizabeth, who had spent her dying weeks trying to fix the mistakes she'd made. I'm not leaving, Elena said finally. Not yet. Not until I understand everything that happened here and decide what should be done about it. Robert nodded slowly. Then let me show you. All of it. No more secrets, no more manipulation. Just the truth, however ugly it is. Elena followed him toward the basement door, her mother's notebook clutched against her chest. The baby kicked and Elena whispered a promise she intended to keep. We're going to make this right, mija, whatever it takes. The basement stairs creaked under their weight as Elena descended for the second time that day. But everything felt different now. The air seemed heavier. The smell of fermentation mixed with something else, the scent of decades of lies finally exposed. Robert moved slowly ahead of her, his shoulders hunched in a way she hadn't seen before. The proud, calculating man who had threatened her just hours ago was gone. In his place stood someone broken, someone confronting the ruins of everything he'd believed. The first experiment started in 1976, Robert said without turning around. Elizabeth was 28, I was 32. We thought we were going to change the world. Elena followed him past the rows of fermentation vessels, past the hospital bed that now looked more sinister than scientific, toward a section of the basement she hadn't noticed before. A wall of filing cabinets, dozens of them, each labeled with dates spanning 5 decades. Every subject, Robert said, pulling open a drawer. Every trial, every result. I documented everything because I believed future generations would want to study our methods. His voice cracked. I never imagined the documentation would prove we were killing people. Elena reached past him and pulled out a file at random. The name on the tab read Subject 17, Harold Chen. Chen, Elena said. Like Margaret Chen. Robert froze. Her father. He volunteered for the trials in 1989. He had pancreatic cancer stage 4. We offered him a chance to try the compounds. He lived 18 months longer than his doctors predicted. And then, organ failure. We thought it was the cancer. Now. Robert couldn't finish the sentence. Elena opened the file. Medical records, consent forms, progress notes. And at the end, a death certificate listing cause of death as complications from experimental treatment. Margaret knew, Elena said slowly. She knew her father died because of your experiments. That's why she reached out to my mother. That's why she tried to warn me. She didn't know the truth. None of us did. We believed the compounds were helping until they suddenly weren't. Robert closed the drawer. But ignorance isn't innocence. I should have questioned the pattern. I should have seen that everyone who improved eventually got worse. Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. You made a mistake trusting him. Helen has friends in high places. They're coming for the formula. Get out now. Who is that? Robert asked, noticing her expression change. I don't know. Elena showed him the message. Someone warning me about Helen. Robert's face went pale. She's already making moves. I should have known she wouldn't just walk away. He grabbed Elena's arm. We need to secure the notebook. If Helen gets her hands on that formula, she'll complete the foundation and sell it to the highest bidder. Poison marketed as a miracle cure. Exactly. Robert moved toward the stairs. Where's the notebook now? In my room, under the mattress. They climbed the stairs quickly, Robert moving faster than Elena had seen him move before. But when they reached the hallway leading to Elena's room, both of them stopped cold. The door was open. Elena's suitcase lay on the floor, contents scattered everywhere. The mattress had been flipped, drawers pulled out and dumped. The notebook was gone. No. Elena pushed past Robert, frantically searching through the debris. No, it was right here. I hid it right here. Helen must have come back. While we were in the basement, she must have... Robert's voice cut off as his phone rang. He looked at the screen. His expression told Elena everything. It's her, he said. Answer it. Robert pressed the speaker button. Helen's voice filled the room, cold and triumphant. I told you that you'd regret your decision, Robert. I hope you understand now that I wasn't bluffing. Give back the notebook, Helen. I don't think so. This formula is worth more than your entire farm, more than your pathetic research, more than your misguided morality. Helen laughed. But I'm a reasonable woman. I'm willing to negotiate. Elena stepped closer to the phone. What do you want? Ah, the granddaughter speaks. What I want is simple. Robert's research notes. All of them. Every file in that basement, every formula, every piece of data. You're going to bring them to me, and in exchange, I won't sell the corrective formula to the pharmaceutical company that's been courting me for the past 3 years. If you sell the formula, they'll complete the foundation. People will die. People die every day, Elena. At least this way, they'll die rich. Helen's voice turned serious. You have until midnight tomorrow. There's an abandoned barn on Route 7 about 20 miles north of the farm. Bring everything or the formula goes to Meridian Pharmaceuticals by morning. The call ended. Elena stared at Robert. What do we do? Robert was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly racing. Then he looked at Elena with an expression she hadn't seen before. Determination. We give her what she wants, Mitchell, he said. What? You can't be serious. If she gets your research... She's going to get research, just not the real research. Robert moved toward the kitchen. Elena, I've been documenting this work for 50 years. Do you think I only kept one copy? Elena felt hope spark in her chest. You have backups. I have everything backed up 3 times over. What I'm going to give Helen is a version I created years ago, modified data, altered formulas, research that looks authentic but leads nowhere. Robert's eyes hardened. She wanted to use my work against me. Let's see how she handles work that's designed to fail. Elena followed him to the kitchen where Robert pulled open a drawer and retrieved a set of keys. The barn, he said. Not Helen's barn, my barn. There's a hidden room in the back behind the old hay storage. That's where I keep the real archives. And the fake archives. In a safe deposit box in town. I created them 15 years ago when I started suspecting that someone might eventually try to steal the research. Robert looked at Elena. I'm not as naive as Helen thinks. I just never imagined it would be her. They moved quickly. Elena helped Robert load boxes from the safe deposit box into his truck, her pregnant body protesting every movement. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. We should rest, Robert said. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. I can't rest. Not with Helen out there, not with my mother's notebook in her hand. Robert touched her arm gently. Elena, you're 7 months pregnant. Whatever happens tomorrow, I need you healthy. I need that baby healthy. His voice softened. You're the only family I have left, the only chance I have to make things right. Elena wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her. The baby had been quiet for hours, which worried her more than she wanted to admit. A few hours, she agreed. Then we plan. Elena woke at 6 a.m. to the sound of breaking glass. She was on her feet before her conscious mind caught up heart-pounding hands instinctively covering her belly. The sound had come from somewhere downstairs. Robert, she called out. No answer. Elena grabbed her phone and moved toward her door, pressing her ear against the wood. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving through the house with purpose. She dialed 911, but the call wouldn't connect. No signal. Someone had jammed the cell towers. Elena's mind raced. The window. She could get out through the window run for the barn, hide until the door burst open. 2 men stood in the doorway dressed in black faces obscured by masks. Behind them, a woman Elena recognized. Helen Wright, looking calm and satisfied. Good morning, Elena. I hope you slept well. Where's Robert? Your grandfather is having a conversation with some associates of mine. He's being surprisingly cooperative considering the circumstances. Helen stepped into the room. I have to admit I'm impressed by how quickly you two bonded. Yesterday he was threatening to deport you. Today he's defending you like you're his own daughter. What do you want? The same thing I wanted last night. The real research. Robert's actual files, not the garbage he was planning to feed me. Helen smiled coldly. Did you really think I wouldn't notice I've been working with Robert for 15 years? I know his handwriting, his notation style, his thought processes. The moment I saw those files, I knew they were fakes. Elena felt her heart sink. Their plan had failed before it even started. So here's what's going to happen, Helen continued. You're going to tell me where the real archives are hidden. And if you don't, my associates are going to make Robert very uncomfortable. He's 78 years old, Elena. His body can't handle much stress. You wouldn't hurt him. You need him. I needed him when I thought he was the only one who understood the research. But you've changed that equation. Helen moved closer. You're a chef. You understand fermentation, preservation, the chemistry of transformation. And more importantly, you have Harrison blood. You could continue this work better than Robert ever could. Elena stared at her. You want me to replace him? I want you to join me. Think about it. You're a refugee alone, pregnant with no resources and no future. I'm offering you wealth security purpose. All you have to do is help me complete what Elizabeth started. Elizabeth's work killed people. It killed her own husband's research subjects. It killed her. Elizabeth's work was flawed because she didn't have the corrective formula, but I have it now. Helen held up the notebook. With this, we can fix everything. We can create compounds that actually work, that actually extend life without the toxic side effects. Don't you want that? Don't you want to be part of something that could change human history? For a moment, Elena was tempted. Not by Helen's vision, she could see clearly that the woman was driven by greed and ambition, not altruism. But by the possibility that her grandmother's work might actually have value, that something good could come from all this death and deception. Then she thought about her mother, about Sophia, who had spent 30 years hiding from this legacy, who had raised Elena to believe in honesty and integrity and doing the right thing even when it was hard. No, Elena said. Helen's expression hardened. That's disappointing. I don't care what you think. You can threaten me, you can hurt Robert, but I'm not going to help you poison people for profit. Then you leave me no choice. Helen turned to the men behind her. Bring her, and find those archives. Tear this entire property apart if you have to. The men moved toward Elena. She backed up until she hit the wall, one hand pressed against her belly, the other raised defensively. Wait. Robert's voice came from the hallway. Wait, please. He appeared in the doorway, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead held upright by a third masked man. His eyes found Elena's, and something passed between them. An understanding. I'll tell you where the archives are, Robert said. Just don't hurt her, don't hurt the baby. Helen smiled. Now we're being reasonable. Where are they? The barn. Behind the hay storage, there's a false wall. The archives are in a fireproof safe inside. Elena wanted to scream at him to stop, to not give Helen what she wanted. But then she saw Robert's hand move slightly at his side. 3 fingers extended, then 2, then 1. A countdown. Show me, Helen commanded. Robert nodded and turned toward the door. The man holding him pushed him forward. Helen followed, gesturing for her other associates to bring Elena. As they walked through the farmhouse, Elena noticed something she'd missed before. A thin wisp of smoke rising from the direction of the barn. Robert had set a fire. When they reached the barn doors, the smoke was thicker, billowing out from the gaps in the old wood. Helen's expression shifted from triumph to fury. What did you do? I destroyed it, Robert said calmly. All of it. Every piece of research, every file, every formula. 50 years of work gone. You're lying. Am I? Check for yourself. Helen ran to the barn door and pulled it open. Flames erupted from inside, driving her back. The heat was intense even from 20 feet away. You senile fool, Helen screamed. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've ended it, Robert said. The work was poisoned from the beginning. Elizabeth's formulas. My research, all of it, designed to kill people while pretending to save them. I couldn't let that continue. I couldn't let anyone else die because of my arrogance. Helen stared at him with pure hatred. You still have the knowledge. You can recreate it. I'm 78 years old, with a head injury and a guilty conscience. Whatever I remember dies with me. Robert looked at Elena, but I made sure of something else too. I called the fire department before we left the house, and the police, and a journalist friend who's been investigating pharmaceutical corruption for years. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Helen's face went white. You're bluffing. Listen for yourself. The sirens grew louder, multiple vehicles approaching fast. Helen grabbed Elena's arm, pulling her close. You're coming with me. You're my insurance. Let her go, Helen. Shut up, old man. This isn't over. There are other ways to... Elena moved. Years of working in professional kitchens had taught her to be quick to adapt to defend herself in environments full of sharp objects and aggressive people. She drove her elbow into Helen's stomach, twisted out of her grip, and grabbed a rusted pitchfork from beside the barn door. Touch me again, Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, and I will put this through your chest. Helen stared at her, genuinely surprised for the first time. You wouldn't. I survived a war that killed my husband. I survived 18 months in a refugee camp. I crossed an ocean while pregnant to find a family that turned out to be full of liars and murderers. Elena adjusted her grip on the pitchfork. Do you really want to test what I'm capable of? The sirens were very close now. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees. Helen made a decision. She turned and ran toward the woods behind the property, her masked associates following. Within seconds, they had disappeared into the forest. Elena dropped the pitchfork as her legs gave out. She sank to the ground, one hand pressed against her belly, breathing hard. Robert knelt beside her. Are you hurt? I'm fine. The baby's fine. Elena looked at him. You burned your life's work. I burned poison that I'd convinced myself was medicine. Robert's voice was heavy with exhaustion. Your grandmother spent her final weeks trying to fix what she'd created. I should have listened. I should have understood that some mistakes can't be corrected. They can only be ended. The fire trucks arrived, followed by police cars and an ambulance. Chaos erupted around them, firefighters attacking the blaze, officers spreading out to search for Helen and her associates, paramedics rushing toward Robert and Elena. In the middle of it all, a woman approached, mid-50s professional clothing, carrying a notebook of her own. Mr. Harrison, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm the journalist you contacted. She looked at the burning barn, then at Elena. It seems like you have quite a story to tell. Robert glanced at Elena. We do, but it's not just my story anymore, it's hers too. Then let's hear it, all of it. The interview lasted 3 hours. Elena and Robert sat in the farmhouse kitchen, now filled with police officers and investigators, and told Sarah Mitchell everything. The experiments, as the deaths, Helen Wright's betrayal, the decades of deception that had cost so many lives. When they finished, Sarah Mitchell looked at them with an expression that mixed horror with professional fascination. This is going to be one of the biggest stories of the decade, she said. A secret pharmaceutical operation, experimental treatments that killed people, a cover-up spanning 50 years. Do you understand what you're exposing? We understand, Robert said. That's why we're doing it. There will be consequences. Legal liability, public scrutiny, possible criminal charges. You could lose everything. Robert laughed bitterly. I've already lost everything that mattered. My wife, my daughter, years of believing I was helping people when I was actually hurting them. What's left to lose? Sarah turned to Elena. What about you? You're not complicit in any of this. You could walk away, start fresh somewhere else. Elena thought about the question. About her mother, who had walked away 30 years ago. About the notebook, hidden somewhere with Helen, containing the only hope of fixing what Elizabeth had created. I'm not walking away, Elena said. My grandmother started this. My mother tried to stop it. I'm going to finish it one way or another. What does that mean? It means Helen still has the corrective formula. If she sells it to a pharmaceutical company, they could use Elizabeth's notes to create something even worse. Or they could use them to actually fix the compounds. Elena's hand moved to her belly. I have to get that notebook back. For my daughter's sake, for everyone's sake. Robert reached out and took Elena's hand. We'll find it together. For the first time since arriving at the farm, Elena felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. The police searched for Helen Wright for 4 days. They found her car abandoned near the Canadian border, but no trace of Helen herself. The notebook was gone. Elena spent those days recovering both physically and emotionally. Patricia Chen came to visit, bringing clothes and supplies, and the kind of practical support that Elena desperately needed. You could come back to the city, Patricia offered. I found a family willing to sponsor you. Good people, stable home, no secret laboratories in the basement. Elena smiled slightly. You're sure about the basement part? I checked personally. But Elena shook her head. Not yet. There's still work to do here. Elena, you're 8 months pregnant. You've been through trauma that would break most people. You need rest, stability, safety. I need to finish what my mother started. Elena looked out the window at the charred remains of the barn. Sarah Harrison ran from this place and spent 30 years hiding. She thought she was protecting me by keeping me ignorant, but ignorance isn't protection. It's just delay. Patricia sighed. What are you going to do? Find Helen, get the notebook back, and figure out if there's anything worth saving in my grandmother's research. And Robert... Elena was quiet for a moment. Her relationship with her grandfather had changed dramatically over the past week. The manipulative stranger who'd threatened her had been replaced by a broken man trying to atone for decades of mistakes. He's family, Elena said finally. The only family I have left. We're going to figure this out together. Patricia nodded slowly. Then I'll help however I can. Just promise me you'll be careful. I'm past careful. I'm doing what's necessary. That night, Elena received a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press the accept button. Elena. The voice was familiar. Margaret Chen. I heard what happened at the farm. Are you safe? I'm alive. Helen got away with the notebook. I know, that's why I'm calling. Margaret paused. There's something I never told your mother, something I never told anyone, but you need to know it now. What? Elizabeth Harrison didn't just create one corrective formula, she created two. The one in the notebook was the simplified version designed for mass production. But there was another version more complex, more powerful, that she hid somewhere only your mother knew about. Elena's heart began to pound. My mother never mentioned anything like that. Because she didn't remember. Elizabeth made her promise to hide it, then used hypnotherapy to bury the memory. She was afraid Robert would find it and use it before understanding the dangers. Margaret's voice dropped. But before your mother died, she called me. She said she'd started remembering things, images, locations, details that didn't make sense. She was going to call you to explain everything. But she died before she could. Where is it, the second formula? I don't know. Only your mother knew. But Elena? Margaret hesitated. The images she described to me, the fragments of memory, they matched places in your childhood. Places you would have been as a little girl, places your mother would have taken you. You think she hid it near me in my country. I think she hid it where you would eventually find it, where you would be ready to find it. Margaret's voice softened. Your mother spent 30 years preparing for this moment, Elena. She just ran out of time to explain it herself. The call ended, leaving Elena standing in the darkened farmhouse with her mind racing. A second formula, hidden somewhere in her past, waiting for her to remember. She thought about her childhood, the restaurant, the apartment above it, the places her mother had taken her on special occasions. Memories she hadn't examined in months, buried under layers of grief and displacement. But now she needed to excavate them, to find the pieces her mother had left behind. Elena walked to Robert's room and knocked on the door. Come in. He was sitting by the window, staring at the night sky. He looked older than he had a week ago, as if the revelations had aged him decades. I just got a call from Margaret Chen. Robert turned his expression wary. What did she want? Elena told him everything. The second formula, the hypnotherapy, the fragments of memory her mother had started recovering before her death. When she finished, Robert was quiet for a long time. Elizabeth never told me about a second formula, he said finally. Maybe she didn't trust you to use it wisely. Robert flinched but nodded. That would have been fair. I was obsessed with the work. I would have pushed to use it before understanding the risks. He looked at Elena. Do you believe Margaret? I believe my mother was trying to protect me. I believe she hid something important. And I believe the only way to find it is to go back to where I came from. You want to return. After everything you went through to leave, I want to find the truth, whatever it takes. Elena's hand moved to her belly. My daughter deserves to be born into a world where this work can't hurt anyone. If that means going back, I'll go back. Robert stood slowly. Then I'm coming with you. You can't. You're under investigation. The police want you here for questioning. I've already given them everything I know. The rest is legal procedures that my lawyer can handle. Robert moved toward her. Elena, I spent 50 years making mistakes because I was too proud to ask for help. I'm not making that mistake again. If you're going to find Elizabeth's second formula, I'm going to help you. Elena looked at him, this complicated man who had threatened her and saved her, who had lied to her and told her the truth, who had destroyed his life's work to protect her. Why? She asked. After everything, why do you care so much? Robert's eyes glistened. Because you're all I have left. Because your mother never gave me a chance to make things right, and I'll be damned if I waste the chance you're giving me." His voice cracked. "And because somewhere in your belly is my great-grandchild who deserves a better legacy than poison and lies." Elena felt tears forming in her own eyes. She didn't try to stop them. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll go together." They began planning that night. Elena made lists of every place she remembered from her childhood: the restaurant, her apartment, her mother's favorite market, the park where they'd spent Sunday afternoons. Any location that might hold significance. Robert researched travel arrangements, financial logistics, safety considerations for a pregnant woman crossing borders. And somewhere in the darkness outside, Helen Wright was making her own plans. Plans that would intersect with Elena's in ways neither of them could predict. But for now, Elena focused on what she could control: the memories she needed to recover, the formula she needed to find, the family she was slowly, painfully learning to trust. At midnight, she went to her room and sat on the bed, one hand pressed against her belly. "I'm going to take you home, mija," she whispered to her daughter, "to the place where your grandmother hid something important, and then we're going to finish what she started." The baby kicked in response. Elena closed her eyes and tried to remember. The flight to Buenos Aires took 14 hours. Elena spent most of it unable to sleep, watching clouds pass beneath them, while Robert dozed fitfully in the seat beside her. 8 months pregnant and returning to the country that had nearly killed her. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. She had fled this place with nothing but the clothes on her back and the life growing inside her. Now she was coming back with a grandfather she barely knew, searching for a formula hidden by a mother who had lied to her for 30 years. "You should rest." Robert's voice startled her. His eyes were open, watching her with concern. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see Helen's face." "She won't follow us here. She doesn't know about the second formula." "You don't know that." Elena turned to face him. "Margaret found out about it. If she knows, others might know too." Robert was quiet for a moment. "You don't trust me." "I'm trying to trust you, but you lied to me for the first 3 days I knew you. You threatened to have me deported. You let Helen Wright manipulate both of us." Elena's voice hardened. "Trust takes time. I'm giving you that time, but don't expect me to forget what happened." "I wouldn't ask you to forget. I just hope you'll eventually forgive." The plane began its descent. Through the window, Elena could see the sprawling city below, a place that held both her happiest and darkest memories. "I was married here," she said quietly. "Miguel and I had a restaurant in the San Telmo district, small but successful. We were going to raise our daughter there." "What happened?" "Violence happened. The same violence that's been tearing this region apart for decades. Miguel was caught in the crossfire during a protest. Wrong place, wrong time." Elena's hand moved to her belly. "I found out I was pregnant the day after his funeral." Robert reached out and touched her arm. "I'm sorry for everything you've been through." "Don't be sorry. Help me finish this so my daughter never has to run the way I did." They landed at Aziza International Airport at 7:43 a.m. local time. The heat hit Elena the moment she stepped off the plane, familiar and oppressive. Her body remembered this climate even if her heart had tried to forget. Immigration was tense. Elena's refugee status made her return complicated, and Robert's American passport drew scrutiny. But Patricia Chen had arranged temporary visas, and after 2 hours of questioning, they were released into the city. "Where do we start?" Robert asked as they stood outside the terminal. Elena closed her eyes and tried to focus. Margaret had said the formula was hidden somewhere connected to her childhood, somewhere her mother would have taken her as a little girl. "The restaurant," she said. "It burned down when Miguel died, but the building might still be standing. My mother used to take me there before I owned it. She said it was where she learned to love cooking again." They took a taxi through streets Elena had walked 1,000 times. The city looked the same, but felt different. Smaller somehow. Less permanent. The building that had housed her restaurant was a charred shell fenced off and marked for demolition. Elena stood on the sidewalk staring at what remained of her life with Miguel. "This can't be the place," Robert said. "Even if your mother hid something here, it would have been destroyed in the fire." Unless she hid it somewhere, the fire couldn't reach. Elena walked around the perimeter of the fence until she found what she was looking for, a maintenance access point. "The building has a basement. The fire started on the upper floors. If anything survived, it would be down there." "Elena, you're 8 months pregnant. You can't crawl through a burned-out building." "Then help me find another way in." They circled the block until they found a construction worker who, for the right price, agreed to let them access the basement through a side entrance. The man looked at Elena's belly with concern, but didn't ask questions. The basement was dark and smelled of smoke even months after the fire. Elena used her phone's flashlight to navigate Robert close behind her. "What are we looking for?" he asked. "I don't know. Something that doesn't belong. Something my mother would have hidden." They searched for an hour, moving through debris and collapsed shelving. Elena was about to give up when her foot caught on something, a loose tile, different from the others around it. "Robert, over here." He helped her pry up the tile, revealing a small hollow space beneath. Inside was a metal box sealed tight, covered in dust, but undamaged by fire or water. Elena's hands shook as she lifted it out. "This is it. This has to be it." They didn't open the box in the basement. Elena carried it back to the street, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. In the taxi back to their hotel, she finally broke the seal. Inside was a letter, and nothing else. Elena unfolded the paper with trembling fingers, her mother's handwriting older and shakier than the notebook from the farm. "Elena, if you're reading this, it means you found your way back to where it all started. I'm sorry I couldn't explain everything while I was alive. I was afraid of your grandfather finding us, afraid of the work catching up with us, afraid of passing on a burden you never asked to carry. But some burdens can't be escaped. They can only be faced. The formula isn't here. This was just the first clue to make sure you were committed to finding it. The real hiding place is somewhere only you could find. Somewhere we went together when you were very young. Somewhere I told you was magic. Think, Mija. Remember what I said about magic places. And be careful. If you found this, others might be looking too. I love you, always. Mama." Elena read the letter 3 times before she could speak. "A magic place?" she whispered. "She's talking about somewhere we went together. What does that mean?" "I don't know. I was so young." Elena pressed her palms against her temples, trying to force the memories forward. "We went so many places. The market, the parks, the church where she lit candles for my father's family. Did she call any of those places magic?" Elena closed her eyes. Fragments of memory surfaced. Her mother's voice. A smell of flowers running through tall grass. "The botanical garden," Elena said suddenly. "She used to take me to the botanical garden on my birthday. She said it was the most magical place in the city because things grew there that couldn't grow anywhere else." "Then that's where we go next." The Jardín Botánico was exactly as Elena remembered it. Winding paths through tropical vegetation, old trees that had stood for centuries, quiet corners. Corners where visitors could escape the chaos of the city. Elena walked slowly, letting memory guide her. Robert followed at a distance, understanding that this was a journey she needed to make at her own pace. The deeper she went into the garden, the stronger the memories became. Her mother holding her hand, pointing at exotic flowers, telling stories about plants that came from far away that had traveled across oceans to find a new home. "Just like us," her mother had said, "sometimes the most beautiful things grow where you least expect them." Elena stopped at a greenhouse near the back of the garden. It was old glass panels, clouded with age, but still maintained by the garden staff. "This is it," Elena said. "She brought me here on my 5th birthday. She said there was a secret inside that only special people could find. Did you find it?" "I was 5. I thought she was talking about a fairy or a hidden treasure." Elena approached the greenhouse door. "I never thought to look again?" Inside, the air was thick with humidity and the scent of tropical flowers. Elena moved through rows of plants, running her fingers along leaves, trying to remember exactly where her mother had led her that day. In the corner, behind a massive fern that had grown wild over the years, she found it. A small stone marker barely visible beneath the foliage. The words carved into it were faded, but readable. "Para mi niña, aquí está la magia." For my little girl, here is the magic. Elena knelt beside the marker, ignoring the protest from her pregnant body. She dug into the soil with her bare hands, feeling Robert drop beside her to help. 6 inches down, her fingers hit metal. Another box, larger than the first, sealed with a combination lock. "What's the combination?" Robert asked. Elena stared at the lock. 4 digits. Her mind raced through possibilities. Her birthday, her mother's birthday, Miguel's birthday. Then she remembered. "The date my parents met," she said. "My mother told me the story 100 times. September 3rd, 1987, 0309. She entered the code. The lock clicked open. Inside the box was a leather portfolio similar to the notebook from the farm, but larger and more elaborate. Elena opened it carefully, and her breath caught in her throat. Pages and pages of formulas, diagrams, notes in her grandmother's handwriting. But these were different from anything Robert had shown her. More complex. More detailed. and at the front a letter in Elizabeth Harrison's hand. To whoever opens this, if you're reading these words, it means my daughter Sarah trusted you enough to reveal this hiding place. What you hold in your hands is the corrective formula, the true version, not the simplified one I left in Sarah's notebook. This formula can neutralize the toxic compounds Robert and I created. It can heal the damage we caused. But it can also do something else. Something I discovered in my final months, something I never told anyone because I wasn't sure it was real. The compounds we created weren't just poison. In the right concentration with the right catalyst, they can genuinely extend human life. The problem was dosage and timing. We were too aggressive, too impatient. We wanted results faster than nature allows. This formula provides the correction. It slows the process, reduces the toxicity, allows the beneficial effects to emerge over decades instead of months. Used properly, it could add 30 or 40 healthy years to a human lifespan. Used improperly, it's still poison. I trust whoever finds this is to make the right choice. Don't let our mistakes define this work's future. Find a better way. Elizabeth Harrison, 1995. Elena's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the portfolio. She knew, Robert whispered, his voice cracked with emotion. Elizabeth knew there was a way to make it work. She just couldn't tell me before she died. Why wouldn't she tell you? Because she knew I was too obsessed to be careful. She knew I'd pushed too hard, too fast, the same way we always had. Robert's eyes glistened with tears. She was protecting the work from me, from my own impatience. Elena looked at the formulas spread before her. Years of research, decades of secrets, the potential to change human medicine forever, and the potential to cause immeasurable harm if it fell into the wrong hands. What do we do with this? She asked. Before Robert could answer, a voice came from behind them. You give it to me. Elena spun around. Helen Wright stood at the greenhouse entrance, flanked by two men Elena didn't recognize. How she had followed them here, how she had known where to look, none of that mattered now. What mattered was the gun in her hand. Hello, Elena. Robert, I have to admit I'm impressed. You found it faster than I expected. How did you know we were here? Robert demanded. I've had people watching you since you left Vermont. Did you really think you could fly to another continent without me noticing? Helen moved closer, her gun trained on Elena. Now hand over the portfolio, slowly. Elena clutched the portfolio against her chest. If I give you this, you'll sell it to Meridian. They'll mass-produce the compounds without understanding the dosage requirements. People will die. People die every day. At least this way some of them might live longer first. Helen's voice was cold. I'm not going to ask again. Elena. Robert's voice was steady. Give it to her. What? No, this is what my mother died protecting. This is what my grandmother hid for 30 years. I'm not just handing it over to give it to her. Robert stepped forward, positioning himself between Elena and Helen. The portfolio isn't worth your life. It isn't worth my great-grandchild's life. Let her have it. Helen smiled. Finally, some sense. Now, Elena, the portfolio. Elena's mind raced. She thought about running, but she was 8 months pregnant in a humid greenhouse with no clear exit. She thought about fighting, but Helen had a gun and 2 men backing her up. She thought about her daughter, about the life growing inside her, about everything she'd already sacrificed to keep that life safe. She handed over the portfolio. Helen opened it, scanning the pages with hungry eyes. Perfect. This is exactly what Meridian needs. The corrective formula, the dosage calculations, everything. She looked up at Robert. You know, I almost feel sorry for you. 50 years of work and your own wife hid the solution because she didn't trust you to use it properly. That must sting. It does, Robert admitted. But at least I'm trying to make things right. What's your excuse? Helen laughed. My excuse is that I'm going to be very, very rich, and you two are going to disappear. She gestured to her men. Take them to the car. We have a long drive ahead. The men moved forward. Elena felt rough hands grab her arms, pulling her toward the greenhouse exit. But as they stepped outside, chaos erupted. Police sirens, shouting in Spanish, armed officers surrounding the greenhouse from every direction. Helen's face went white. What the... I made a call. Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Before we left the hotel this morning, I called an old friend from the neighborhood, a detective who investigated my husband's death. I told him where we'd be and what we were looking for. You're lying. Check my phone. The call log doesn't lie. Elena pulled her arm free from the stunned guard. I knew you'd follow us. I knew you'd show up at exactly the wrong moment, so I made sure the moment wasn't wrong for us. Helen raised her gun toward Elena, but she never got the shot off. A police sniper's bullet caught her shoulder, spinning her around. The gun clattered to the ground. Her men dropped to their knees, hands behind their heads. Within minutes, and it was over. Elena stood in the middle of the chaos, her hand pressed against her belly, watching Helen Wright being loaded into an ambulance in handcuffs. Robert appeared beside her. You planned this. I hoped for it. There's a difference. Elena turned to face him. I learned something from watching you and Helen. Trust has to be verified. I wasn't going to come here without backup. Robert stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and admiration. You really are like your mother, like Elizabeth, all that strategic thinking hidden behind emotional intensity. It runs in the family, apparently. A police detective approached them. Elena recognized him immediately. Carlos Mendez, the man who had investigated Miguel's murder, who had helped her escape the country when the violence made staying impossible. Elena. Carlos embraced her, carefully mindful of her belly. When you called, I didn't believe it. I thought you were gone forever. I thought so too, but some things pull you back. Carlos looked at the greenhouse, at the portfolio still clutched in Helen's evidence-bagged hands. Is that what she was after? What is it? Elena exchanged a glance with Robert. The truth was complicated. Dangerous, not something that could be explained in a police report. Family documents, she said finally. Research for my grandmother. Helen thought it was worth a fortune. Is it? Elena thought about Elizabeth's letter, about the potential for healing and the potential for harm, about the choice that would eventually have to be made. It might be, she admitted, or it might be worthless. We won't know until experts examine it. Carlos nodded slowly. I'll need statements from both of you, and you'll need to stay in the country until the investigation is complete. How long? A few weeks, maybe. Depends on how complicated things get. Carlos looked at Elena's belly. You're due soon. 6 weeks, give or take. Then we'd better work fast. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of police interviews, legal consultations, and medical appointments. Elena found a doctor in Buenos Aires who spoke both Spanish and English, who monitored her pregnancy with careful attention. The baby was healthy, strong heartbeat, good position, ready to enter a world that was far more complicated than Elena had ever imagined. Robert spent his time working with Carlos's team, explaining the research without revealing its full potential. He presented it as experimental food science, as fermentation research that had gotten out of hand. The police seemed satisfied with this explanation. Helen Wright was extradited to the United States, where federal charges awaited her. Wire fraud, conspiracy, assault, kidnapping. The list grew longer every day. And the portfolio, Elizabeth's true formula, sat in an evidence locker waiting for Elena to decide what to do with it. Yaukun? You could destroy it, Robert said one evening. They were sitting on the balcony of Elena's hotel room, watching the sun set over the city. Burn it like I burned the research in the barn. End this once and for all. And waste everything my grandmother worked for, everything my mother sacrificed to protect. The sacrifice might be worth more than the work. Some things shouldn't exist, Elena. Some knowledge is too dangerous to preserve. Or too important to destroy. Elena turned to face him. Elizabeth believed the formula could work. She just couldn't figure out how to make it safe in her lifetime. What if someone else can? Who me? I'm 78 years old. I've already proven I can't be trusted with this research. Not you. Someone younger. Someone with training and resources and oversight. Elena's hand moved to her belly. Maybe someone who hasn't been born yet. Robert stared at her. You want to save the formula for your daughter. I want to give her a choice. The same choice my mother never had. Elena's voice hardened. Sarah Harrison ran from this legacy because she thought it was poison, but Elizabeth believed it could be medicine. My daughter deserves the chance to decide for herself which one of them was right. That's a heavy burden to pass on. All legacies are heavy. The question is whether they're worth carrying. Robert was quiet for a long time. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Your grandmother would have liked you, he said finally. She would have seen her own spirit in you. Tell me about her. The real Elizabeth, not the scientist, the woman. And Robert did? He talked for hours, sharing memories he'd kept locked away for decades. Elizabeth's laugh, her stubborn determination, her belief that food was the most honest form of love. She used to say that cooking was the only art form you could taste, Robert remembered. The That a good meal could communicate things words couldn't express. She thought fermentation was the purest form of cooking because it required patience. You couldn't rush it. You had to trust the process, let time do its work. That sounds like something my mother would say. Sarah learned it from her. Even if she rejected everything else about Elizabeth's work, she carried that philosophy with her. Robert's voice softened. Maybe that's the real legacy, not the formulas or the research, just the understanding that some things can't be rushed. Elena felt her daughter kick, strong and insistent, demanding attention. "She's active tonight," Elena said. "May I?" Robert gestured toward her belly. Elena nodded. Robert placed his weathered hand against her stomach, and the baby kicked again directly against his palm. "Hello, little one," Robert whispered. "I'm your great-grandfather. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I promise I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to make things better for you." Elena watched his face. The hardness that had characterized him when they first met was gone, replaced by something vulnerable and genuine. "You've changed," she said. "I've been forced to confront who I really was. That changes a person whether they want it to or not." "Is that a good thing?" "I think so. I hope so." Robert removed his hand from her belly. "Elena, whatever you decide to do with the formula, I'll support you. If you want to destroy it, I'll help you. If you want to preserve it, I'll help with that too. I'm done trying to control outcomes. I just want to be present for whatever comes next." Elena believed him. For the first time since arriving at the farm, she fully believed him. "I'm not going to destroy it," she said, "but I'm not going to use it either, not yet. I'm going to lock it away somewhere safe and let time do its work. Maybe in 20 years, science will have advanced enough to understand what Elizabeth discovered. Maybe my daughter will become a researcher who can complete what her great-grandmother started. And if she doesn't, then the formula stays locked away forever. Some secrets are worth keeping." Robert nodded slowly. "That sounds like wisdom?" "That sounds like motherhood. Making decisions you hope are right, without any guarantee they will be." Labor started 3 weeks later on a Tuesday morning in a hospital in Buenos Aires. Elena had been having contractions for hours, but she'd dismissed them as false labor Braxton Hicks. Her body practicing for the main event. But when her water broke at 6:47 a.m., there was no more denying it. Robert drove her to the hospital running red lights and ignoring speed limits. "Breathe," he kept saying. "Just breathe." "I know how to breathe," Elena snapped through clenched teeth. "I've been doing it my whole life." The delivery was long and difficult. 14 hours of labor complications with the umbilical cord, a moment of terror when the baby's heart rate dropped. But at 9:23 p.m., Elena's daughter came into the world screaming. 7 pounds 4 ounces. Dark hair like her father. Brown eyes like her mother. Perfect. They placed her on Elena's chest, and everything else disappeared. The pain, the fear, the complicated legacy waiting to be confronted. All that mattered was this tiny life, this miracle she'd carried across oceans and through violence and into an uncertain future. "Hello, mija?" Elena whispered. "Welcome to the world." Robert stood by the door, tears streaming down his face. "What will you name her?" Elena had thought about this for months. She'd considered her mother's name, her grandmother's name, her husband's mother's name. But in the end, the choice was simple. "Hope," Elena said. "Her name is Hope." Because that's what she was. That's what she had always been. The reason Elena had kept fighting when everything seemed lost. The promise of something better. "Hope Harrison Vasquez," Robert repeated. "It's beautiful." "Harrison," Elena looked at him. "I hadn't decided on that yet. You don't have to use it, but I'd like her to have some connection to the family she came from, the good parts of it at least." Elena looked at her daughter, at Hope, this tiny person who would someday have to decide what to do with the legacy her ancestors had left behind. "Hope Harrison Vasquez," Elena said slowly. "Okay, but she gets to choose her own path. No obligations, no expectations, just choices." "Just choices," Robert agreed. "That's all any of us can offer." The nurse came to take Hope for her first examination, and Elena finally allowed herself to rest. She closed her eyes exhausted, but peaceful. For the first time in months, she slept without nightmares. And in the nursery down the hall, Hope Harrison Vasquez opened her eyes and looked out at a world full of possibility. 3 years passed faster than Elena ever imagined possible. Hope took her first steps at 11 months. Spoke her first word at 14 months and by her third birthday had developed a personality so fierce and determined that Robert joked she'd inherited the stubbornness of 4 generations of Harrison women. Elena watched her daughter toddle through the farmhouse kitchen, reaching for everything, curious about everything, and felt a joy so intense it sometimes brought her to tears. They had returned to Vermont 18 months after Hope's birth, once the legal complications in Argentina were resolved and Elena's immigration status was finally secure. The farmhouse had been renovated during their absence, the basement sealed and converted into ordinary storage. The fermentation equipment was gone, donated to a university research program that Robert had vetted personally. The formula remained locked in a safety deposit box in Boston, waiting for a future that hadn't yet arrived. "Mama, look." Hope held up a wooden spoon she'd taken from the counter, waving it like a wand. "Magic." Elena knelt beside her daughter. "That's right, mija. Cooking is magic. Like abuela." The word hit Elena like a physical blow. Hope had never met, Sophia would never meet her, and yet somehow the connection persisted. Elena had told her stories about her grandmother, shown her photographs, kept the memory alive in the only way she could. "Yes," Elena said softly, "like abuela. She was the most magical cook I ever knew." Robert appeared in the doorway, moving slower than he had 3 years ago, but still present, still engaged, still fighting to be the grandfather he'd never been for Sarah. "Hope, come see what I found in the barn." "Getsinlia." Hope dropped the spoon and ran to him, grabbing his hand with complete trust. Elena watched them disappear together, this unlikely pair, bound by blood and choice, and the complicated legacy that connected them all. Her phone buzzed, a message from Patricia Chen. "Call me when you can, it's important." Elena felt her heart rate spike. Patricia had been a constant presence over the past 3 years, checking in regularly, helping navigate bureaucratic obstacles, becoming something closer to family than social worker. But this message felt different. Urgent. Elena stepped onto the porch and dialed. "Elena?" Patricia's voice was tense. "I just got a call from the FBI. Helen Wright escaped from federal custody this morning." The world tilted. Elena grabbed the porch railing to steady herself. "How?" "They're still investigating. She was being transferred to a lower security facility for good behavior. Something went wrong during transport." Patricia paused. "Elena, they think she had help. Someone on the inside." "Where is she now?" "They don't know, but the agent I spoke with said something that concerned me. Helen's been receiving visitors for the past 6 months. Regular visits from representatives of Meridian Pharmaceuticals, the same company she was trying to sell the formula to." Elena closed her eyes. 3 years of peace, to building a new life of believing the nightmare was finally over, and now this. What do I do? The FBI is sending agents to Vermont. They should arrive by tonight. In the meantime, don't go anywhere alone. Don't let Hope out of your sight. And Elena, Patricia's voice dropped. If Helen contacts you, don't engage. She's dangerous, and she's desperate. That's a lethal combination. The call ended. Elena stood on the porch watching Robert and Hope emerge from the barn, laughing about something she couldn't hear. She had 2 choices. Tell Robert immediately and watch fear destroy the fragile peace they'd built. Or wait until the FBI arrived and hope Helen was caught before she could reach Vermont. Elena chose a third option. She walked to the barn, took Hope from Robert's arms, and looked her grandfather directly in the eyes. "Helen escaped. FBI is coming. We need to talk about what happens next." Robert's face went pale, but his voice stayed steady. "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe, or she might already be on her way." "The formula, does she know where it is?" "No, but she knows we have it, and she knows we're here." Robert looked at Hope, who was playing with a strand of Elena's hair, oblivious to the danger that had just re-entered their lives. "We need to move it," he said. "If Helen's coming, the safety deposit box isn't secure enough. She'll find a way to access it." "Where else can we put it?" Robert was quiet for a moment. "There's someone I should have told you about. Someone Elizabeth trusted more than anyone else in the world." Elena stared at him. 3 years of honesty of rebuilding trust, and he'd still been keeping secrets. "Who?" "Elizabeth's sister, Margaret Harrison Wright." The name hit Elena like a thunderbolt. "Wright, as in Helen Wright. Helen is Elizabeth's niece. I thought you knew." Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "Helen is family. She's been family this whole time. She came to work with me 15 years ago because she said she wanted to continue Elizabeth's legacy. I never questioned it. I was so desperate for help for someone who understood the work that I didn't see what she really wanted. Which was the formula, the money, the power that comes from controlling something people will pay any price to possess." Robert's voice hardened. Helen's mother, Elizabeth's sister Margaret, was the one who introduced Elizabeth to fermentation science. She was brilliant, maybe even more brilliant than Elizabeth, but she had different values, different priorities. Is she still alive? I don't know. We lost contact decades ago, but if she is, and if Helen has reconnected with her, then Helen might have resources we don't know about, support from someone who understands the formula as well as Elizabeth did. Robert nodded grimly. We need to find Margaret before Helen does. If there's anyone who can help us understand what we're dealing with, it's her. And if Margaret is the one helping Helen, then we're in more danger than we realized. The FBI arrived at 6:47 p.m. Two agents, professional and serious, who took statements, examined the property, and established a protection detail around the farmhouse. Agent Sarah Morrison, the lead investigator, sat with Elena in the kitchen while her partner swept the barn and outbuildings. Ms. Vasquez, I need you to understand the severity of this situation. Helen Wright isn't just a fugitive. She's a fugitive with connections to powerful corporate interests. Meridian Pharmaceuticals has spent 3 years trying to acquire the research your family developed. They've lobbied, they've litigated, they've done everything legal to get access. Helen's escape suggests they're willing to try illegal methods now. What do they want exactly? Life extension technology. The compounds your grandmother developed have generated enormous interest in the pharmaceutical industry. Even with the toxicity issues, there are companies willing to spend billions to be first to market with something that works. The formula isn't complete. It needs the corrective compound to be safe. We know. That's why Helen is so dangerous. She had access to the corrective formula before she was arrested. If she still has it, or if she can recreate it from memory, Meridian might have everything they need. Elena thought about the portfolio locked in Boston, the only remaining copy of Elizabeth's true work. I need to move something, Elena said, something that can't fall into Helen's hands. Agent Morrison studied her carefully. The formula, yes. Where is it now? Elena hesitated. Trust had been broken so many times over the past 3 years. Every person she'd confided in had eventually revealed hidden agendas or divided loyalties, but she was out of options. A safety deposit box, First National Bank, Boston, under my name and Robert Harrison's. Agent Morrison nodded. I'll have agents secure the location tonight. Tomorrow we'll arrange to move it somewhere more secure. Where? FBI evidence storage. It'll be protected by federal security protocols. No one gets access without multiple authorizations. Including me? Including you, for now? Agent Morrison leaned forward. Ms. Vasquez, I know you don't trust law enforcement. Your history with institutions hasn't been positive. But right now, we're the best option you have. Let us protect you. Let us protect your daughter. Elena looked through the window at Hope, who was playing with Robert on the floor of the living room, stacking blocks and knocking them down with delighted shrieks. Okay, she said finally, but I want to be there when you move the formula. I need to see where it goes. That can be arranged? Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat in Hope's room watching her daughter breathe, thinking about everything that had happened and everything that might happen next. At 3:47 a.m., her phone buzzed. An unknown number, a text message. Elena, I know you're scared, but we need to talk, not about the formula, about your grandmother, about what Elizabeth really discovered. Meet me at the Botanical Garden, tomorrow, noon. Come alone or I disappear forever. This is your only chance to understand the truth. Margaret Harrison Wright. Elena's blood ran cold. Not Helen. Helen's mother. The woman Robert had just told her about. She stared at the message for a long time, weighing her options. Going alone was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but Margaret claimed to know the truth about Elizabeth. The real truth, not the versions Robert and Helen had been selling for decades. Elena made a decision. She texted back, I'll be there. Then she deleted both messages and went back to watching her daughter sleep. The next morning, Elena told Robert and Agent Morrison that she needed to run errands in town. Supplies for Hope, prescriptions to pick up, normal boring tasks that wouldn't raise suspicion. Robert offered to come with her. She declined, citing his need to rest and Hope's desire for his company. Agent Morrison wanted to send an agent along. Elena convinced her that a visible FBI presence would draw attention in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. At 11:30 a.m., Elena drove to the Botanical Garden alone. The garden was different from the one in Buenos Aires, smaller and less tropical, but it carried the same sense of quiet purpose. Plants growing, time passing, life continuing despite everything that tried to stop it. Elena found a bench near the greenhouse and waited. At exactly noon, an elderly woman approached. White hair, sharp eyes, a posture that suggested strength. Despite advanced age, she looked nothing like Helen, but something in her expression was familiar. The same hunger, the same intelligence, the same dangerous determination. Elena Vasquez? Margaret Harrison Wright sat down beside her. You look just like your mother. Sarah was a beautiful girl. You knew my mother. I knew everyone in that family. Elizabeth was my sister. Robert was my colleague before he became my brother-in-law. Sarah was born in my house, actually. Did anyone tell you that? Elena shook her head. Elizabeth was having complications during labor. The hospital was too far. I delivered Sarah myself in my kitchen, while Robert paced and prayed in the living room. Margaret's voice softened with memory. She was a fighter from her first breath, screaming at the world, demanding to be heard. Your daughter is the same way, I imagine. How do you know about Hope? I've been watching, from a distance, making sure Helen didn't hurt any of you. Margaret's expression hardened. My daughter has done terrible things I tried to prevent but couldn't. She inherited my ambition without my ethics. A dangerous combination. You're saying you're not working with her. I'm saying I've spent the last 3 years trying to stop her. Why do you think she was caught in Argentina? I'm the one who tipped off your detective friend. I'm the one who made sure the police arrived before Helen could hurt you. Elena processed this. If that's true, why didn't you reveal yourself sooner? Because I wasn't sure you could be trusted. Sarah ran from this family. She spent 30 years hiding from everything we represented. I needed to see if you were the same or if you were capable of understanding what's really at stake. And what is really at stake? Margaret was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades. Elizabeth's formula works, Elena. Not the toxic version Robert was experimenting with. The real version. The one she perfected in her final months and hid because she knew the world wasn't ready for it. The corrective formula. No, something else, something she never told anyone about except me. Margaret pulled an envelope from her purse. Elizabeth discovered that the compounds didn't just extend life. In the right concentration, they could repair genetic damage, reverse cellular aging, cure diseases that modern medicine considers incurable. Elena stared at the envelope. That's impossible. That's what I thought, until I saw it work. Margaret's eyes glistened. I had cancer, Elena, 20 years ago. Stage 4 pancreatic, the same thing that killed your grandmother's test subjects. Elizabeth gave me the formula. The real one, not the poison. I'm 93 years old, and the cancer has never returned. Elena felt dizzy. You're 93? I look 70 at most, I know. That's what the formula does. It doesn't stop aging, it slows it, dramatically. Why are you telling me this? Because Helen has figured it out. She's known for years that I survived, that the formula worked on me. That's why she's so desperate to get her hands on the complete research. She doesn't want to sell it to Meridian for profit. She wants it for herself. She's terrified of dying, Elena. More terrified than you can imagine. So she's trying to steal immortality. She's trying to steal time. More time than any human being deserves. Margaret pressed the envelope into Elena's hands. This contains everything I know. Elizabeth's real notes, the ones she never showed Robert. The formula that saved my life. And the truth about what happened to your mother. Elena's heart stopped. My mother. Sarah found out about the formula 3 months before she died. She contacted me demanding answers. I told her everything. Margaret's voice cracked. She was going to come home, Elena. She was going to confront Robert, reveal the truth, try to make things right. But she never got the chance. The violence in my country, the crossfire that killed my husband. It wasn't crossfire. It wasn't random violence. Margaret's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Helen arranged it. She found out Sarah was planning to expose the truth, and she made sure Sarah never got the chance. Miguel was collateral damage. You were supposed to die too, but you escaped. Elena couldn't breathe. The world was spinning around her, everything she'd believed for the past 4 years collapsing into a new, horrifying shape. Helen killed my husband. Helen killed your mother. Your husband was just in the way. Margaret grabbed Elena's hands. I know this is devastating. I know you need time to process, but right now we don't have time. Helen is coming. She knows I'm alive. She knows I have the real formula, and she knows you're the key to everything. Why me? Because you're Elizabeth's blood. The formula works best on people who share her genetic lineage. That's why it saved me. I'm her sister. That's why it would work perfectly on you, on Hope, on anyone descended from Elizabeth Harrison. Margaret's voice intensified. Helen needs you alive, Elena. She needs your blood, and she'll do anything to get it. Elena pulled her hands free and stood up. I need to get back. Hope is... Her phone rang. Robert's number. Elena. His voice was strained, barely controlled. Come home. Now. What's wrong? Helen's here. She has Hope. Elena's vision went white. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except feel terror so absolute it paralyzed every part of her body. Then the paralysis broke and she ran. She drove faster than she'd ever driven before, ignoring traffic laws, ignoring the speedometer, climbing past 90, ignoring everything except the desperate need to reach her daughter. Margaret followed in her own car, calling the FBI, trying to coordinate a response that Elena knew would come too late. Hope, her baby, her reason for surviving everything, in Helen's hands. Elena burst through the farmhouse door 20 minutes later to find Robert sitting in the kitchen, hands bound to a chair, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, and Helen standing behind him with a knife to his throat. Welcome home, Elena. I was starting to think you'd run. Where is Hope? Safe. For now, in a location that my associates are protecting until I get what I need. Helen's voice was calm, almost conversational. It's simple, really. You have something I want. I have something you want. We make a trade. The formula. Not just the formula, your blood. A few samples regularly collected. Enough to synthesize the compounds I need. Helen smiled. You see, my mother told you the truth. The formula works best on Elizabeth's descendants. Unfortunately for me, I'm only connected by marriage, but you and Hope, you have the right genetics. You're the key to everything. You killed my husband. You killed my mother. I did what was necessary to protect the work. Your mother was going to destroy everything Elizabeth created. I couldn't allow that. Helen pressed the knife closer to Robert's throat. Now make your choice. Give me what I want or watch your grandfather die, then I take you and Hope anyway, just less politely. Elena's mind raced. She had no weapon, no backup, no way to overpower Helen or her unseen associates. But she had something else. Knowledge. The formula won't work on you, Elena said. Not the way you think. Helen's expression flickered. What do you mean? Elizabeth didn't just create a life extension compound. She created a genetic lock. The formula only works on people who share her bloodline. Anyone else who takes it... Elena paused, letting the implication hang. It doesn't extend their life. It ends it. You're lying. Ask your mother. She's right outside. She's the one who told me the truth. Elena stepped closer, ignoring the knife at Robert's throat. You've been chasing this formula for years, Helen. You've killed for it, betrayed for it, destroyed your entire life for it. And it was never going to save you. Elizabeth made sure of that. Helen's composure cracked. That's impossible. The formula worked on the test subjects. It worked on people with genetic compatibility. The volunteers Robert tested, some of them survived because they happened to share genetic markers with the Harrison line. Others died because they didn't. Elena's voice hardened. You've been running on bad data, Helen. You've been murdering people for something that would have killed you anyway. The knife wavered at Robert's throat. Helen's face contorted with rage and denial. You're lying. You have to be lying. Let my grandfather go, release my daughter, and I'll give you proof. I'll show you Elizabeth's real research, the genetic specifications, the compatibility requirements, everything. You can verify it yourself. And if you're telling the truth, then you walk away. You find another way to cheat death, because this one was never going to work for you. Helen stared at Elena for a long moment. The knife trembled against Robert's skin. Then slowly she lowered it. Show me. Elena led Helen to the basement, the ordinary storage space the laboratory had become. She pulled out the envelope Margaret had given her, spreading Elizabeth's real notes across a table. Helen read them in silence, her face going paler with each page. The genetic lock was real. Elizabeth had designed the formula to work only on her direct descendants, a safeguard against exactly the kind of exploitation Helen had attempted. No, Helen whispered. No, this can't be right. I've spent 30 years. You've spent 30 years chasing something that was never meant for you. Elena's voice was quiet but firm. Elizabeth loved her family. She wanted to protect them even after her death. She never intended for this formula to be sold or stolen or used by people who didn't share her blood. Then what was the point? Helen's voice cracked. Why create something so powerful if it could only help a handful of people? Because that's what family does. We protect our own. We make sacrifices so the people we love can have better lives. Elena stepped closer. You could have been part of that family, Helen. You were Elizabeth's niece, but you chose greed over connection, ambition over love, and now you have nothing. Helen stared at the papers in her hands. The evidence of her wasted life, her pointless crimes, her ultimate failure. Where's my daughter? Warehouse on Route 7. My associates have instructions to release her if I don't check in within 2 hours. Helen's voice was hollow, defeated. Take her. Take the formula. Take everything. I don't care anymore. Elena grabbed her phone and dialed Agent Morrison. I know where Hope is. Route 7 warehouse. Send everyone you have. FBI agents found Hope 45 minutes later unharmed, being held by 2 men who surrendered without resistance. Elena held her daughter for 3 hours straight, refusing to let go, whispering promises in Spanish and English that everything was going to be okay. Helen Wright was arrested that night, along with her associates and 3 executives from Meridian Pharmaceuticals who had funded her escape. The charges included kidnapping, conspiracy fraud, and once Margaret's testimony was entered into evidence, 2 counts of murder. Sarah Harrison, Miguel Vasquez, finally receiving justice 3 years after their deaths. Margaret Harrison Wright came to the farmhouse the next morning. Elena met her on the porch, Hope in her arms, Robert standing behind them. You saved us, Elena said. Why, after everything Helen did, you could have walked away. Let the past stay buried. Margaret reached out and touched Hope's cheek gently. Because Elizabeth asked me to. Before she died, she made me promise to watch over her descendants, to protect the family she was leaving behind. Her eyes moved to Elena. I failed with Sarah. I was too far away, too slow to act. But you gave me a second chance. What happens now? That's up to you. Margaret gestured at the envelope still in Elena's possession. The formula is yours. The knowledge, the potential, the responsibility. You can destroy it, lock it away, or find a way to use it that honors what Elizabeth intended. What did Elizabeth intend? Margaret smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her weathered face. She wanted her family to live long, healthy lives. She wanted to give them more time together, more time to fix mistakes, more time to love each other. Margaret's voice softened. That's all any of us want, really, more time. Elena looked at Hope, at Robert, at this complicated family she'd inherited through blood and choice. I'm going to keep it, she said finally. Not for me, for Hope. When she's old enough to understand, I'll give her the choice Elizabeth never had, the choice my mother never had. She can decide what to do with this legacy. And until then, I'm going to raise my daughter, teach her to cook, tell her stories about the grandmother she never met and the great-grandmother who created something extraordinary. Elena's voice strengthened. I'm going to live my life, Margaret. Not in fear, not in hiding, not waiting for the next crisis, just living. That's what my mother wanted for me. That's what I want for Hope. Margaret nodded slowly. Elizabeth would be proud of you. I hope so, but I'm not doing this for her approval. I'm doing it because it's right. Robert stepped forward, placing his hand on Elena's shoulder. We're doing it, together. Elena leaned into his touch. 3 years ago, she'd arrived at this farm, pregnant, terrified, trusting a stranger, because she had no other choice. Now she had a family. Complicated, imperfect, bound by secrets and mistakes and the slow work of forgiveness. But family nonetheless. 6 months later, Elena opened a restaurant in Millbrook. She called it Sophia's after her mother. The menu featured dishes from both her heritages, South American flavors, combined with techniques Elizabeth had developed in this very kitchen decades ago. Robert helped with the business side, using skills from his engineering career to manage finances and logistics. Hope became the restaurant's unofficial mascot, charming customers with her fierce personality and her grandmother's eyes. Margaret visited monthly, sharing stories about Elizabeth teaching Elena fermentation techniques that had been passed down through generations of Harrison women. And the formula remained locked away, waiting for the day when Hope would be old enough to decide its fate. On the restaurant's 1-year anniversary, Elena stood in the kitchen after closing, looking at the photograph she'd hung on the wall. Her mother as a young woman standing in the original Harrison farm kitchen, learning to cook from a grandmother Elena had never known. Hope tugged at her sleeve. Mama, who's that? That's your great-great-grandmother Elizabeth, and that's your grandmother Sophia when she was young. They look like us. Elena smiled. They do. Because we're family, and family means we carry pieces of each other forward even when we can't be together anymore. Like magic. Exactly like magic, mija. Hope studied the photograph seriously. I want to cook like them when I'm big. Then I'll teach you. Everything they taught me, everything we've learned together. It's all yours. Robert appeared in the doorway, holding up a bottle of wine. I found something in the cellar. Elizabeth's private reserve, 60 years old. Elena took the bottle carefully. A gift from across time from a grandmother who had planned for this moment decades before Elena was born. Should we open it? I think Elizabeth would have wanted us to. She always said wine was meant to be shared, not hoarded. They gathered in the dining room Elena, Robert, Hope, and Margaret, who had driven up for the anniversary celebration. 4 generations of Harrison family connected by blood and choice and the complicated legacy that bound them together. Robert poured the wine amber liquid, catching the light like liquid gold. To Elizabeth, he said, raising his glass. Who started all of this? To Sophia, Elena added, who protected us when we didn't even know we needed protecting. To family, Margaret finished. The ones we're born into and the ones we choose. They drank together and Elena felt something settle inside her. Peace. Not the absence of problems. There would always be problems, always challenges, always new crises to face. But peace nonetheless. The peace that came from finally understanding where she came from and who she was meant to be. Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Elena sat on the porch of the farmhouse watching stars appear in the Vermont sky. She thought about her mother who had spent 30 years running from this place. She thought about her grandmother who had created something extraordinary and then hidden it away to protect the people she loved. She thought about Hope asleep inside, dreaming whatever dreams 3-year-olds dream about. And she thought about herself, a refugee who had become a mother, a stranger who had become family, a woman who had found home in the last place she expected. The formula was real, the legacy was real, the danger and the possibility were real. But so was this moment, this peace, this life she had built from the wreckage of everything she'd lost. Elena pressed her hand against the porch railing, feeling the solid wood beneath her palm. Her mother had touched this railing. Her grandmother had touched it. Generations of Harrison women had stood in this exact spot, looking at these same stars, wondering about the future. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know what choices Hope would make when she was old enough to understand the legacy she'd inherited. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Elena Vasquez had spent her whole life searching for a place to belong. She had crossed oceans and borders and the boundaries between past and future. And finally, impossibly, she had found it. Not in a country or a city or a building, in the people who loved her, in the daughter who carried her hope, in the family that had been waiting for her all along. Elena stood up and walked inside, closing the door gently behind her. The night settled over Harrison Farm, quiet and complete. And somewhere in the basement, locked in a box that would stay sealed until the right moment, Elizabeth Harrison's greatest creation waited patiently for the next generation to decide its fate. Some legacies are inherited, some are discovered, some are chosen. But the best legacies, the ones that truly matter, are the ones we build ourselves from the pieces of everyone who came before us. Elena Harrison Vasquez had inherited a legacy of secrets, science, and sacrifice. But the legacy she was building for hope for herself, for everyone who would come after, was something entirely her own. A legacy of love, a legacy of choice, a legacy of home, and that was the only legacy that had ever really mattered.